and welcome to Crowvane Manor. Wherever you are, and whatever kind of night it's been, you've come to the right place to slow down. Let the world go quiet for a while. Out here, none of it needs your attention. Many of you return to these rooms night after night, and I'm grateful for that. There's a reason you keep coming back. The stories kept inside these walls aren't quite like the ones you'll hear anywhere else. Before we begin, leave a comment and tell me where in the world you're listening from tonight. I always enjoy reading them. And if these stories stay with you, a like and a subscribe help more than you know. Now get comfortable, breathe slow, and let's open the door together. I heard someone knocking at the front door. It was clear enough that I stopped what I was doing and listened for a second, just to make sure I had really heard it. Sometimes houses make noises that sound like something else, and sometimes a sound from outside can travel in a strange way. But this sounded like a knock. Not a creak, not a pipe, not the house settling. A knock. So I went to the front door and opened it. No one was there. At first, that did not scare me. It was strange, but not terrifying. There are plenty of normal explanations for a knock with no person behind it. Maybe someone had knocked and then walked away quickly. Maybe a delivery person had gone to the wrong house. Maybe a neighbor had come by and changed their mind. Maybe I had taken too long to answer. Or maybe I had just heard something that only sounded like the door. I looked outside for a moment, saw nothing, and tried to brush it off. I closed the door and went back inside. Then I heard someone at the back door. That made me pause. One strange knock at the front could be explained. A knock at the back door right after that felt different. It was the same kind of clear knocking sound, like someone was standing there and trying to get my attention. I went to the back door, expecting to catch someone this time. Maybe whoever had knocked at the front had gone around the house. Maybe it was a kid playing a joke or someone trying to scare me. I opened the back door and looked out. No one was there either. Again, I tried to stay calm. It still seemed possible that someone was messing with me. That was the most normal explanation, and I wanted it to be true. I thought maybe some kids were screwing around. Maybe they had run from the front door to the back door and then hidden somewhere. Kids do stupid things like that. They knock and run away, laugh from behind bushes or fences, and think it is hilarious because they are not the ones standing inside confused. I told myself it was probably something like that. Still, I looked around. I did not see anybody. No movement, no shadows running away, no whispering, no kids hiding in an obvious place. Nothing. I went back inside, trying to convince myself that I was just being annoyed, not scared. Then the front door knocked again. This time, I moved quickly. I thought I might finally catch whoever was doing it. If it was kids, I wanted to open the door fast enough to see them before they ran off. I walked quickly to the front door, grabbed the handle, and opened it right away. Nothing. There was no one on the porch, no one in the yard, no one moving away from the house. I looked out, expecting to see at least some sign of a prank, but the area was empty. The knock had sounded real. It had sounded close. It had sounded like it came from that door. But there was nobody there. I closed the front door, and almost right after that, the back door knocked again. By then, my irritation was turning into something else. It was not full fear yet, but it was getting there. The pattern was too strange. Front door, nothing. Back door, nothing. Front door again, nothing. Back door again, nothing. It was like someone was moving faster than they should have been able to move, or like the knocking was coming from places where no one actually was. I went to the back door again and opened it. Still nothing. This time, I went outside through the back door and looked around more carefully. I wanted to catch someone. I wanted proof that it was just a person being annoying. I checked the area as best as I could, looking for movement, listening for footsteps, waiting for laughter or some kind of sign that whoever was doing it had slipped up. But there was nothing there. No one hiding close by. No one running away. No obvious place where someone could have disappeared so fast without me seeing them. That was when the feeling in my stomach started to change. It is one thing to think someone is playing a trick on you. It is another thing to go outside and find no trace of anyone at all. I did not want to jump to anything strange. I did not want to be dramatic, but the timing and speed did not make sense. If it had been kids, they would have had to run from one door to the other incredibly fast, knock, hide, and do it again without making noise or being seen. And the more it happened, the less that explanation seemed to fit. I went back inside. I ended up standing somewhere in the middle of the house, between the front door and the back door. I think I was trying to listen to both sides at once. I did not know where the next knock would come from, and I did not want to keep running back and forth like an idiot. So I stood there, tense and alert, waiting. Then I heard knocking on both doors. At the same time, that was the moment the situation stopped feeling like a prank. The sound came from the front door and the back door together, like two separate people were knocking at once. It was not just one little tap either. It was clear. It was physical. It sounded like someone was at both doors, striking them with their knuckles or fists. I froze for a second because my mind could not make sense of it. If one person had been running back and forth, then they could not be at both doors at the same time. If it was kids, then there would have had to be at least two of them, one at each door. But I had just checked outside. There had been nothing. The knocking continued. It started getting louder. At first, it was just unsettling. Then it became frightening. The volume increased, and the rhythm became more intense. The front door and the back door were both being knocked on, over and over, harder and harder. The sound filled the house in a way that made it impossible to ignore. It did not sound like one random noise anymore. It sounded like the doors were being attacked by invisible hands. I stood there, listening as it got worse. The knocking became so loud that it started hurting my ears. That is what I remember most clearly. It was not just scary because I did not understand it. It was physically painful. The sound pressed into my head. It was too much, too fast, too loud, too close. The knocks seemed to come from both directions, bouncing through the house until I could not think clearly. It felt like the whole place had turned into noise. At that point, fear took over. I grabbed a knife. I do not even know if that was the smartest thing to do, but in that moment, I needed something in my hand. I felt like if someone was about to come through one of those doors, I had to be ready. The logical part of my brain was still trying to figure out what was happening, but the survival part did not care anymore. It heard the doors being pounded on and decided that whatever came inside was going to be a threat. So I stood there with the knife, waiting. The knocking kept going. It got louder and louder, more intense, more aggressive. It did not sound playful. It did not sound like kids anymore. Kids might knock and run. They might laugh. They might bang on one door and then disappear. But this was different. This was relentless. It was as if something wanted to break me down with the sound alone. The house felt like it was being surrounded, even though I knew that did not make sense. I had checked. There had been no one. But the sound was real to me. It was everywhere. I remember feeling cornered even though I was inside my own home. That is a horrible feeling. Your home is supposed to be the place where you can shut the world out. Doors are supposed to protect you. But in that moment, The doors felt like weak barriers between me and something I could not see. I did not know whether to stand closer to the front door or the back door. I did not know which one would open first, if either of them opened. I did not know if I should call someone, yell, run, or stay still. The noise kept building. My ears hurt. My heart was pounding. My grip on the knife was tight. I was ready for something to come through the doors, even though I had no idea what I expected to see. A person? Two people? A group of kids? A stranger? Nothing? The fact that I could not answer that made it worse. Fear becomes much more powerful when it does not have a clear shape. Finally, I snapped. I yelled, "Come in here and I'll kill you. There is no knocking." It sounds strange when I repeat it now, but that was what came out of me. Part of me was threatening whoever might have been outside. Another part of me was rejecting the whole thing, like I was trying to force reality back into place. "There is no knocking" was not just a sentence. It was like I was trying to command the sound to stop. I was trying to tell myself it was not real, or tell whatever it was that I was not going to be afraid anymore. I do not know. I only know that I shouted it with everything I had. Then, it stopped, just like that. No more knocking, no fading away, no final tap, no footsteps running off, no laughter, no sound of anyone leaving. It simply stopped. The silence that came after was almost as shocking as the noise had been. A few seconds earlier, the knocking had been so loud that it hurt my ears. Then the house was quiet. Too quiet. I stood there with the knife, breathing hard, waiting for it to start again, but it did not. I listened toward the front door. Nothing. I listened toward the back door. Nothing, no movement outside. No voices. No sign of anyone. The whole thing was over. But I did not feel relieved right away. I still had the knife in my hand. My body was still full of adrenaline. My ears still felt like they remembered the sound. I was scared to move because part of me thought the knocking might start again the second I let my guard down. The silence felt fragile, like one wrong breath could bring the noise back. I do not know how long I stood there before I finally began to calm down, but it felt longer than it probably was. Afterward, I tried to explain it to myself. The first explanation was still kids. It had to be kids, right? Someone playing a trick, someone knocking and running away. But that did not really work. The knocking had moved too quickly between doors. Then it had happened on both doors at the same time. It had gotten too loud, too intense, too impossible to ignore. I had gone outside and seen nothing. I had checked. There was no sign of anyone. It did not feel like a prank anymore. The second explanation was that it had been in my head. That is the explanation that scares me in a different way. If there was no one outside and no physical source, then maybe I heard something that was not really there. Maybe my brain created it. Maybe it was some kind of auditory hallucination. I do not know. I have not had any psychotic breaks in the past, and I have not had any since then. This was not part of a pattern. It was not something that kept happening. I did not hear voices. I did not see things. I did not have other experiences like it. It was just this one event, one terrifying burst of knocking that started at the doors, grew louder and louder, and then stopped when I yelled. That is what makes it hard for me to understand. If it had been a mental health issue, why did it happen only once? Why did it feel so connected to the doors? Why did it respond to me yelling? Why did it build in such a specific way? I am not saying it could not have been in my head. Maybe it was. Maybe the brain can produce one strange, isolated experience under stress or for reasons I will never understand. But it did not feel like a vague sound or a distant ringing. It felt like knocking. Real knocking. On both doors. Loud enough to hurt. And if it was not in my head, then what was it? I do not have a good answer. That is why I do not like telling this story to people. It is not only because it is strange, it is because once you tell someone something like this, they start looking at you differently. Any mention of a possible mental issue can become ammunition later. People can use it against you, even if it happened once and never happened again. They can turn one unexplained experience into a reason not to trust you. They can say you are unstable, dramatic, unreliable, or making things up. That is a heavy price to pay for telling the truth about something you do not understand. So I usually keep it to myself. It is easier not to talk about it. It is easier to let the memory sit quietly in the back of my mind than to explain it and watch someone decide what it means about me. I know what people can be like. They act sympathetic in the moment, but later, if there is ever an argument or a disagreement, they bring it up. They say, well, you heard knocking that wasn't there, as if that cancels out everything else you say. That is why I hate sharing it. Not because I am ashamed of what happened, but because I know how people use fear and mental health against others. Still, the memory has never completely left me. I remember the first knock at the front door. I remember opening it and seeing nobody. I remember the back door next. I remember thinking it was probably kids. I remember moving faster the next time, trying to catch them. I remember going outside and finding nothing. I remember standing between both doors and hearing the knocking start on both sides at once. I remember the sound getting louder and louder until it hurt. I remember grabbing the knife. I remember yelling. I remember the sudden silence. The silence is what stays with me almost as much as the knocking. Because when something stops that suddenly, it feels like it heard you. That thought makes me uncomfortable. If the knocking was in my head, then maybe yelling broke the fear or snapped me out of it. If it was outside, then whoever or whatever was making the sound chose to stop after I challenged it. Either way, the timing was too exact to forget. I yelled that there was no knocking, and then there was no knocking. I do not know whether that means anything. I have tried to think about the house itself. Was there some mechanical reason? Pipes? Heating? Animals? Wind? Loose doors? Could something in the walls have made sounds that seemed like knocking? Maybe. Houses make strange noises sometimes. But again, the sound moved between the front and back doors, then happened on both doors at once. It sounded like knocks, not pipes. It grew in volume and intensity. It felt directed, and it stopped when I yelled. I cannot make the house noise explanation fit in a way that satisfies me. I have also wondered if fear changed the sound. Maybe one ordinary knock happened, then my mind amplified normal noises until they became unbearable. Maybe I was already on edge, and my brain turned random sounds into a pattern. That is possible. The mind is powerful, and fear can distort things. But the memory does not feel like a slow distortion. It feels clear. It feels like an event that happened outside me, not something I gradually imagined. I wish I could say I found out later that some neighborhood kids had been doing it. That would make the story easier. I would rather believe a group of kids were fast, cruel, and hiding well than believe my own mind created something so terrifying, or that something unknown was at my doors. But I never found any proof of kids. I never heard anyone admit to it. No one laughed about it later. No one came forward. There was no explanation waiting for me after the fear faded. It just happened. And then, it was over. The strangest part is that I have lived normally since then. I did not go on to have a series of strange episodes. I did not start hearing things every night. I did not have some major break with reality. It was not the beginning of a pattern. It was one moment in my life that stands apart from everything else. That almost makes it harder to explain. because there is no larger story to attach it to. Just one day, one house, two doors, and knocking that should not have been possible. I think about what I said when I yelled. There is no knocking. That line is strange because it was both a denial and a command. I was hearing it, but I was also refusing it. I was telling the noise it did not exist. Maybe that was my brain fighting itself. Maybe some part of me knew it was not real and forced it to stop. Or maybe something outside the doors stopped because I stopped being afraid in the way it wanted. I do not know which explanation is worse. People like clean endings. They like stories where the source is discovered, where the prankster is caught, where the ghost is confirmed, or where the person admits they were dreaming. This story does not have that. There was no source, no person, no proof, no repeated episode, no diagnosis, no answer. Just the memory of standing between two doors while invisible knocking grew so loud that it hurt my ears. That is why I still think about it. Not every scary experience comes with something you can point to. Sometimes the scariest thing is sound. A sound that should have a source but does not. A sound that behaves like someone is there when no one is. A sound that stops when you challenge it, leaving you alone with the question of whether you scared it away or scared yourself awake. I still do not know what happened. Maybe it was in my head. Maybe it was kids. Maybe it was some rare, strange combination of house noises and fear. Maybe it was something else entirely. I have no proof for any answer. I only know what I experienced. Knocking at the front door, then the back, then both at once, louder and louder, until I could barely stand it. Then I yelled, and it stopped. I had something similar happen to me one night, except mine was a moving tapping sound. The best way I can describe it is that it felt like the sound was mocking me. It was not one of those normal house noises where you hear a tap once, look around, find nothing, and then forget about it. This sound kept moving. It would come from one place, and when I went to check, it would stop there and start somewhere else. Then I would check that new place, and it would move again. It felt like something was playing a game with me, and I was the only one who did not know the rules. At first, I tried to explain it in all the normal ways. That is always where my mind goes first. Houses make strange noises. Pipes knock. Wood expands and contracts. Small animals get into walls. Birds can land in places you do not expect. Wind can move things around outside. There are 100 normal reasons why someone might hear tapping in a house. So when it started, I did not immediately think anything paranormal was happening. I just thought there had to be some simple cause, and if I looked around long enough, I would find it. But the tapping did not act like a normal house sound. It moved too deliberately. I would hear it in one spot, clear and sharp, like someone tapping with a finger or a small object. I would stop what I was doing and listen. Then I would go over to that area and try to figure it out. The second I focused on it, the sound would be somewhere else. Not randomly, either. It felt almost like it was staying just ahead of me. I would check one corner, then it would come from across the room. I would move toward that area, and then it would come from somewhere behind me. It was annoying at first, but after a while, it became unsettling. There is something deeply creepy about a sound that seems aware of you. A pipe does not know you are listening. A bird does not wait for you to walk closer before moving the noise to another place. But this tapping had that feeling. It felt responsive. It felt like it knew when I was paying attention. I do not mean it spoke, or formed words, or anything dramatic like that. It was just tapping. But the way it moved made it feel like more than a sound. My wife heard it too, which is one of the reasons I know I was not just losing my mind. If I had been the only one hearing it, I probably would have doubted myself much more. I would have wondered if I was tired, stressed, or imagining it. But she heard it as well. We both heard it, moving around. We both tried to figure out what it was. And because it kept happening in such a strange way, we eventually gave it a name. We called it the Tappening. The name made it easier to talk about. It made it a little funny, like we were turning it into a household joke instead of admitting how weird it was. That is something people do when they are uncomfortable. You make a joke out of the thing that scares you so it feels less powerful. The Tappening sounded ridiculous, and saying it made us laugh, but the sound itself still bothered me. Every time it started, I would feel that same mix of irritation and dread. Here we go again. The tapping is back. Eventually, the sound settled in the fireplace, which made the whole thing even stranger. Before that, it had been moving around from place to place, refusing to stay still long enough for us to understand it. But then, for some reason, it seemed to choose the fireplace. That was weird because the fireplace had its own set of possible explanations, but none of them felt quite right. A bird in the chimney would be one guess. Maybe a crow, maybe some other animal. But it did not sound like a bird moving around. It did not sound like scratching, flapping, or claws. It was tapping. Clear, deliberate tapping. We thought about pipes, too, but that did not fit either. Pipes can make knocking sounds, sure, but this was not the same kind of noise. It was not hidden deep inside the walls in the way plumbing sounds usually are. It sounded closer, more direct. And again, the way it moved before settling in the fireplace made the pipe explanation feel weak. Pipes do not usually play hide and seek with you around the house before deciding to perform from the fireplace. At one point, I even had a video of it. I do not know where that video is now, but I remember having it, and that matters to me. It means I was not just remembering it wrong or exaggerating it later. There was a time when I had actual proof of the sound. My wife heard it, and I had recorded it. That does not mean I know what it was, but it does mean it was not only inside my head. There was a real sound happening in that house, and we both experienced it. Then one day, it did something different. It gave 3 slow taps, not a random set of taps, not the usual moving noise. 3 slow, clear taps. For some reason, I decided to tap the same pattern back. It was almost like playing Simon, that old memory game where you copy the pattern. I heard the taps, and I answered with the same number. 3 slow taps back. At first, it felt silly. Maybe part of me was testing it. Maybe part of me wanted to prove it was random. If I tapped back and nothing happened, then maybe I could laugh and move on. But it answered. We went back and forth like that for a little while. I would tap, and then it would tap. Or it would tap, and I would copy it. I do not remember every pattern, but I remember the feeling of the exchange. That was the point where it stopped being just weird and started feeling too strange for comfort. A moving tapping sound is unsettling. A tapping sound that seems to respond is something else completely. At first, curiosity pulled me in. That is how these things get you in a way. You want to understand. You want to see if it can repeat patterns. You want to know if it is random or not. You want to test the limits of what is happening. But then, very quickly, the fear catches up. Because if something is responding, then what is it? What exactly are you communicating with? And why are you doing it in your house? I suddenly got weirded out. It was like my common sense finally stepped in and said, this is enough. I did not know what I was interacting with, and I did not want to keep inviting it to continue. So I said something like, okay, enough, please leave. I tried to say it calmly. I did not scream. I did not threaten it. I just told it to stop and asked it to leave. And after that, it never happened again. That is the part that still feels strange. If it had been a pipe, why would it stop forever after I asked it to leave? If it had been a crow or an animal, why would the whole moving tapping pattern end right after that exchange? If it had been the house settling, why did it behave like it was answering and then stop when I told it to stop? I know those questions do not prove anything, but they are the reason I have never been able to fully explain it. I still do not know what the tapping was. I cannot say it was a ghost, because I do not know that. I cannot say it was paranormal, because there may be some explanation I never found. But I can say it was not a crow, not the pipes, and not any normal sound I could identify. It was just a weird, traveling tapping noise that moved around the house, seemed to respond, and stopped after I asked it to leave. That was strange enough on its own. But I had something similar happen in a completely different place, and that one bothered me in a different way. It happened in a hospital. At the time, I was working in healthcare, and there had been a patient who died under my care a few days earlier. That alone is heavy. Even when you know death is part of the job, it does not always feel distant or clinical. Some deaths stay with you more than others. You can do everything you were supposed to do and still carry the memory afterward. Hospitals are full of life and death happening close together, sometimes in the same hall, sometimes in the same room. People recover there. People suffer there. People die there. That kind of place holds a lot of emotional weight, whether you believe in anything spiritual or not. A few days after that patient died, the room was empty. I was on a break and trying to sleep in a recliner in that same room because it was available. Hospital breaks are not always comfortable. Sometimes you take what you can get. An empty room, a recliner, a few quiet minutes. That can feel like a luxury when you are tired enough. I was not trying to be creepy. I was not going in there to think about the patient or scare myself. I was just exhausted and trying to rest. The room was quiet at first. It had that empty hospital room feeling. There is something strange about an empty hospital room, especially when you know someone recently died there. Even if everything has been cleaned and reset, even if the bed is ready for the next person, there is still a feeling. Maybe that is only in your head because you know what happened there. Maybe your mind fills the space with memory. But lying there in that recliner, trying to sleep, I was aware of the room in a way I might not have been otherwise. There was a curtain in the room, and beyond it was the rest of the space. I was trying to settle down when I heard a loud, slamming noise from beyond the curtain. It startled me awake immediately. This was not exploding head syndrome. I know what that is because I get it, and I know the difference. Exploding head syndrome for me is a sudden internal sound, like a crash or bang that happens as you are falling asleep or waking up. It can be startling, but it has a certain quality to it. This was not that. This sounded external. It sounded like something had slammed in the room beyond the curtain. I got up or leaned forward and looked. There was nothing there. No object had fallen. No one was in the room. No door had slammed. Nothing looked out of place. I listened for a moment, probably trying to convince myself it was just some noise from outside the room or somewhere down the hall. Hospitals are noisy places. Carts move, doors close, machines beep, people drop things. Sound can travel strangely through walls and hallways. So I settled back down and tried to rest again. Then, it happened again. Another loud slam. This time it seemed closer. I looked again. Still nothing. That is when the feeling started to change. One unexplained noise in a hospital can be ignored. Two noises, especially when the second one seems closer, are harder to dismiss. I tried to stay practical. Maybe it was a sound from another room. Maybe something in the building was making noise. Maybe a door somewhere was closing and the sound was bouncing in a strange way. But I was in that room, and it sounded like it was coming from beyond the curtain. Not far down the hallway. Not from the ceiling. From the space right there. I lay back again, but I was not relaxed anymore. Every time I tried to settle, my body stayed ready for the next sound. That is the worst part of something like that. The first noise startles you. The second noise makes you wait. After that, the silence becomes stressful because you know another one might come. You are trying to sleep, but your body refuses. Your ears focus on every little shift in the room. Your eyes keep wanting to open. Your breathing changes. Rest becomes impossible. Then the slamming noise came again. Closer, it felt like whatever was making the sound was moving toward the curtain. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds like something out of a horror movie, but that is how it felt. The noise did not stay in one place. It seemed to be advancing, little by little, from farther beyond the curtain to nearer the curtain. Each time, I looked and found nothing. Each time, I tried to tell myself there had to be a normal explanation. But when a sound keeps happening and seems to move closer, your body stops caring about logical explanations. It only cares that something is approaching. I stayed there longer than I probably should have because part of me did not want to give in to fear. I work in a hospital. I know rooms make noise. I know death happens. I know exhaustion can make things feel stranger than they are. I did not want to be the person who ran out of an empty room because of a sound. But there is a point where pride loses to instinct, and I reached it when the slamming seemed to come very close to the curtain. That was enough for me. I bailed on my break. I got out of there because I no longer cared whether there was a logical explanation. Maybe there was. Maybe something in the building was making that noise in a way I could not understand. Maybe the sound was traveling strangely. Maybe I was tired and more sensitive because I knew a patient had died there. Maybe. But at that moment, I did not want to be lying in a recliner on the other side of a curtain while an unexplained slamming noise kept getting closer. I left the room, and I did not try to sleep there anymore. The hospital incident was different from the tapping at home, but they had the same basic feeling. A sound with no clear source, moving in a way that felt too deliberate. At home, it was tapping. It traveled around, settled in the fireplace, and even seemed to respond when I tapped back. In the hospital, it was a loud slamming noise beyond a curtain in a room where someone had recently died, and it seemed to come closer every time I tried to ignore it. I do not know what either thing was. I am not the kind of person who wants to turn every sound into a ghost story. I know there are explanations for a lot of things. Buildings expand and contract. Pipes knock. Animals get into places. Sound travels in weird ways. Exhaustion can make your brain interpret things differently. Hospitals are full of random noises, and houses are too. I understand all of that. But sometimes an explanation being possible does not mean it feels right. The tapping at home did not behave like pipes or animals. My wife heard it. I had a video of it. It moved around, responded, and stopped after I asked it to leave. The hospital slamming did not feel like exploding head syndrome, because I know what that is. It sounded external. It repeated, and it seemed to get closer. In both cases, the weirdest part was not just the noise. It was the sense that the noise had intention. That is what bothers me about these experiences. A random tap is not scary. A random slam is not always scary. But a tap that moves when you go looking for it, or a slam that gets closer each time you lie back down, feels different. It starts to feel like the sound is aware of you, like it is reacting to your attention, like it is not just happening, but happening to you. I still think about the tapping with a mix of humor and discomfort. The name is funny, and the memory of tapping back like Simon is almost ridiculous. But underneath that is the fact that I got scared enough to tell it to leave, and then it never came back. That is not something I can easily file away as nothing. The hospital room is harder to joke about. Maybe because someone had died there only days before. Maybe because hospitals already carry so much pain. Maybe because trying to sleep in that room made me feel vulnerable. Or maybe because the sound seemed to move closer to the curtain, and there is something deeply primal about being separated from an unseen noise by a thin piece of fabric. You know there should be nothing there, but your body acts like something is standing on the other side. I do not claim to have answers. I do not know if either experience was paranormal. I do not know if it was some weird acoustic thing, some building issue, or something more. I only know that both happened. Both were heard outside my own head, and both left me with the feeling that the world is stranger than we usually admit. It is weird out there, people. Sometimes the scariest things are not shapes in the dark or voices calling your name. Sometimes it is just a tap that moves from place to place, or a slam beyond a hospital curtain that gets closer every time you try to rest. And the worst part is that after it stops, you are left standing there with no proof except your memory. No explanation that fully fits. And the quiet feeling that maybe something was trying to get your attention. I can't really say that what happened was scary in the same way some other stories are scary, but it was definitely odd. It was one of those small, strange moments that does not give you enough to fully panic, but it also does not give you enough to explain it away and forget about it. Nothing chased us. Nothing made a sound. No figure appeared in the yard or at the window. It was just something strange in the night sky, but even now, when I think about it, I still do not know what I saw. I was at a friend's place one night, just hanging out. It was a normal evening, the kind where you are not expecting anything important to happen. We were outside for a bit, or at least looking up at the sky from where we were, and the night seemed ordinary. There were stars out, maybe not a perfect sky full of them, but enough that you could notice the brighter ones. It was quiet in that late-night way, where every little thing feels slower and the sky feels bigger, because there is not much else going on. My friend was high that night. I should say that right away, because it matters to the story. He had smoked or taken something, and he was definitely feeling it. I was not high. I was completely sober. That is one of the reasons I have always been careful with this story. If he had been the only one who saw anything, I probably would have shrugged it off as him being high and seeing something strange because of it. But the thing is, even though I did not see everything he claimed to see, I did see enough to know that something strange was there. At first, my friend suddenly reacted to something in the sky. He was looking up, focused on one spot, and then he started talking like he had just seen something impossible. He said he saw a bright light shoot across the sky toward another bright light. According to him, one light was moving fast, like it had a clear direction, and the other one was stationary, just sitting there like a bright star. He said the moving light went straight toward the still one, and when it reached it, the stationary light expanded. Then, after expanding, it retracted again. That sounded wild to me. Because he was high, my first reaction was not exactly belief. I was not trying to be rude about it, but when someone who is high tells you they saw one light shoot into another light in the sky and make it expand, your brain naturally wants to put that in the category of maybe your mind added a little extra. I did not immediately assume he was lying, but I did assume he might have misunderstood what he saw. Maybe it was a plane. Maybe it was a shooting star crossing near a bright star from his point of view. Maybe it was a satellite flare. Maybe it was one of those moments where your eyes and brain connect two separate things that are not actually connected. But he was serious. He pointed up and tried to show me exactly where to look. I followed his direction and looked toward the spot in the sky he was talking about. I missed the moving light completely. If it had really shot across the sky, it was already gone by the time I looked. I cannot claim I saw that part, and I do not want to exaggerate the story by pretending I did. What I saw was the other light. It looked like a bright star. Not the brightest thing in the whole sky, not something as bright as the moon or a plane coming in low, but definitely more noticeable than most of the stars around it. It stood out enough that once my friend pointed it out, I could see why he had focused on it. It had that clean, bright look that a strong star or planet can have on a clear night. It was not blinking the way a plane usually does. It was not moving across the sky like a satellite. It was just there, steady and bright. I stared at it, trying to figure out what I was looking at. At first, I thought it had to be a normal star, or maybe a planet. That would be the easiest explanation. Sometimes people see Venus or Jupiter and think it is something strange because those can look very bright compared to the stars around them. But this did not feel like that, because it did something I have never seen a normal star or planet do. It stayed still for a moment, and then, over maybe 30 seconds or so, it completely faded from view. It did not move away. It did not cross the sky. It did not blink like an aircraft. It did not suddenly shoot off. It just faded. That is the part that bothered me. If it had been a plane, I would have expected movement, flashing lights, or some kind of change in position. If it had been a satellite, I would have expected it to travel across the sky, even slowly. If it had been a shooting star, it would have streaked and disappeared quickly. But this light looked stationary. It sat there like a star, bright enough to notice, and then slowly dimmed until it was gone. The fading was not instant. It took long enough for me to keep watching and realize it was really disappearing. I remember staring at it, waiting for it to come back or show some sign of what it was. But it did not. It just vanished into the sky. I looked around the same area afterward, trying to find it again. I thought maybe a thin cloud had passed in front of it, but I did not remember seeing any obvious cloud movement. If clouds had covered it, I expected other nearby stars to fade too, or for the shape of the cloud to be visible against the sky. I did not see that. I thought maybe my eyes had shifted or lost focus, but I had been watching it directly. The light had been there, and then it was not. My friend, of course, was even more convinced something strange had happened because he believed he had seen the whole thing. He said he saw the moving bright light shoot toward it, the still light expand when they met, and then retract. I did not see that part, so I cannot honestly say whether it happened exactly the way he described it. He was high, and that makes me cautious. But I did see the stationary light fade away, and I was not high at all. That is why the story sticks with me. The strange thing about the sky is that your brain wants to trust it. When you look at the stars, you expect them to be consistent. Stars do not just turn off. Planets do not just vanish in under a minute. Most ordinary things in the sky have patterns. Planes move and blink. Satellites drift across. Meteors flash and burn out. Drones move in ways that are obvious if they are close enough. But a bright point of light sitting still and then fading from sight does not feel like it belongs to any easy category. I kept trying to think of what it might have been. A satellite flare was one possibility. I know satellites can catch sunlight and brighten or fade depending on their angle, and sometimes they can look like a star that appears or disappears. But the thing that made me unsure was how stationary it looked. Maybe it was moving so slowly, or from my angle it seemed still, but I did not notice any movement at all. If it was a satellite, it must have been moving in a way that was not obvious to me. Still, I can admit that might be one of the more reasonable explanations. A plane did not feel right. I have seen plenty of planes at night. They usually move across the sky, and you can often see blinking red or white lights. This did not look like that. There was no clear direction of travel. It did not look like it was coming toward us or away from us either. It just looked like a bright star, fixed in place, fading out. A drone also crossed my mind later, but I do not know. Drones can hover, and they can have bright lights, but this did not look low enough or close enough to be a drone. There was no sound that I noticed, though if it was far enough away, maybe we would not have heard it. Still, the way it faded did not seem like a drone turning away or lowering its light. It looked more like the light itself was being dimmed out of existence. A cloud could explain it if a thin patch passed in front of a star or planet. That would make the light slowly fade. But again, I did not notice clouds covering other stars nearby, and the fade felt too focused on that one object. Maybe the cloud was small or thin enough that I did not notice it. Maybe I was too focused on the light itself to see the sky around it. That is possible. I cannot rule it out completely. But it did not satisfy me at the time, and it still does not fully satisfy me now. The weirdest part is how calm the whole thing was. It was not a dramatic UFO moment like something hovering over a house or making impossible turns. It was just one light in the sky that should have stayed there if it was a star, but did not. My friend saw more than I did, or at least he believed he did, and his version sounded much stranger. But even if I remove his part from the story completely, I am still left with what I saw. A bright, star-like light, stationary, slowly fading from the night sky in less than a minute. That alone was enough to make me uncomfortable. I remember feeling off after it disappeared. Not terrified, exactly, but unsettled. It is a strange feeling to look at the sky and see something that makes you question what your eyes are telling you. The sky is so open that when something strange happens up there, you feel very small. You cannot walk over and check it. You cannot turn on a light and investigate. You cannot look behind the object or see what it really is. You can only stand there and watch, and when it is gone, it is gone. There is no evidence left behind, no sound, no mark, no explanation. My friend was probably more excited or freaked out than I was because he had seen the moving light first. He kept describing it, saying it shot toward the other light and that the still one expanded when they met. I wanted to believe there was a simple answer, but I also did not want to completely dismiss him. People who are high can misread things, sure, but that does not mean they cannot also see something real. He pointed out the light to me, and I saw it too. Maybe his brain added the moving light and expansion, or maybe I simply looked a second too late and missed the most important part. That possibility has always bothered me. What if I had looked up 1 second earlier? Would I have seen the moving light? Would I have seen the stationary one expand? Would the whole thing have made more sense or less? Because I missed that first part, I only have half the experience. I have his version and my version, and they overlap only at the bright light. That makes the story harder to explain and easier to doubt. But the part I personally saw was still strange enough. I do not remember anything else unusual happening that night. No power outage, no weird sounds, no other lights moving around. It was not like we were surrounded by strange activity. It was just that one moment. A friend looking up and reacting. A bright light in the sky, and then the light fading until it disappeared. Afterward, the sky looked normal again. The stars that were still there stayed where they were. The night went on like nothing had happened. That is part of what makes these small experiences so frustrating. If something huge happened, maybe you would have more proof. Maybe other people would report it. Maybe there would be a news story, or a video, or someone else nearby would have seen the same thing. But when it is just one light in the sky and two people standing at a friend's place, there is nothing to hold on to except memory. And memory is easy for other people to question, especially when one of the witnesses was high. I get that. I really do. If someone told me this story, I would probably ask the same questions. Was it a satellite? Was it a cloud? Was it a plane moving directly away? Was it a drone? Was it a flare? Was it a reflection? Was your friend just too high? Those are fair questions. I have asked myself all of them. I am not trying to jump straight to aliens or anything like that. I do not know what it was. I just know that the simple explanations do not feel completely right. The light did not behave the way I expected anything normal to behave. It was too still to be an aircraft, too temporary to be a star, too focused to feel like a cloud covering the sky, and too calm to be a meteor. It looked like a star that decided to fade out. And stars do not do that on a human timescale. That is what made it so off-putting. Maybe there is an explanation that someone more familiar with astronomy or skywatching would know right away. Maybe it was a satellite catching sunlight and then moving into Earth's shadow. Maybe it was a high-altitude object reflecting light at just the right angle. Maybe it was a distant aircraft pointed directly toward us that changed direction or dimmed behind haze. Maybe there was a thin cloud I did not notice. I am open to all of that. I would actually like an answer, because it is not the kind of thing I want to turn into a mystery if it does not have to be one. But at the time, standing there and watching it fade, it felt wrong. It was not scary in a jump scare way. It was not like something was coming for us. It was more like reality briefly did something I did not know it could do. A bright point in the sky, sitting still, then disappearing. Simple, quiet, and strange. Sometimes that is all it takes to make a memory stick. I still think about my friend's description, too. The moving light shooting toward the still one. The still one expanding when the moving light met it, then retracting. If that part was real, then whatever we saw was much stranger than a fading satellite. But because I did not see it myself, I cannot fully stand behind it. All I can say is that he was looking at the sky before I was. He reacted strongly, and when I looked where he pointed, there was definitely a bright light there. And then I watched it vanish. So I do not know. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was something totally normal that I just did not recognize. Maybe my friend's high brain turned a normal satellite or meteor into a more dramatic event, and I only saw the tail end of a satellite flare fading out. That might be the most logical answer. But I have looked at the night sky plenty of times, and I have never seen a bright star-like object fade away. Quite like that. It was not the most terrifying thing in the world, but it was enough to make both of us stop and stare. It was enough that I still remember it. It was enough that I can still picture that light sitting there in the sky, brighter than most of the stars around it, perfectly still, then slowly becoming dimmer until it was gone. I wish I had looked up sooner. I wish I had seen what my friend saw, if he really saw it the way he described. I wish I had taken out my phone and recorded the light before it vanished. But like most strange moments, it happened faster than you think it will. By the time your brain realizes something is worth documenting, it is already over. So that is the whole story. Nothing dramatic, nothing violent, nothing close to the scarier experiences other people have shared. Just one odd night at a friend's place, one high friend claiming he saw a bright light shoot into another one, and me, completely sober, watching what looked like a bright star fade out of the night sky in under a minute. I still have no idea what it was. Forgive me for stepping in for just a moment. If you've only recently found your way here, then welcome. I'm glad you came. If these stories are keeping you company tonight, consider subscribing to Crowvane Manor. New stories arrive here often, the kind that stay with you long after the night is over. And if you tap the bell, you won't have to go looking. The next one will find you on its own. Thank you for being here. Now, let's return to where we left off. My then husband was in the Air Force and worked nights. At that time in my life, everything felt tense in a way that is hard to explain unless you have lived with someone unpredictable. He had a violent temper, and because of that, a lot of my days were spent walking on eggshells. I was always trying to read the mood of the house before anything even happened. I listened for doors, footsteps, the way he moved around, the way he spoke, or even the way he stayed quiet. When someone can go from normal to angry without warning, you learn to notice every little sound. You learn to prepare yourself before you even know what you are preparing for. Because he worked nights, mornings were strange. Sometimes he would come home tired and silent. Sometimes he would come home hungry. Sometimes he would be in a mood, and sometimes he would act like nothing was wrong at all. I never really knew what version of him was going to come through the door. That kind of life changes the way your body reacts to noise. A door opening, something moving in the kitchen, a cabinet being shut a little too hard. All of it can wake you up fast because your brain is trained to expect trouble. One morning I was asleep when I heard sounds coming from the kitchen. It was not a huge crash or anything dramatic, but it was enough to wake me. The sound seemed to come from the direction of the carport door, or at least from that side of the house. The layout of the house made it easy to understand where noises were coming from. If you came in through the carport door, you were immediately in the kitchen. From there, you faced a hallway that went straight back toward the bedrooms. At the very end of that hallway was my older son's room. My room was right before his on the right, and my younger son's room was before mine. Across from my younger son's room was a bathroom. Past that, on one side, was the dining room, and on the other side, separated by a wall, were the living room and then the den. So if I stood in the hallway, I could see straight down toward the kitchen and the door. I have really poor vision. Without my glasses, everything is fuzzy. Shapes are there, but details are not. I can tell if something is a person, or a piece of furniture, or movement, but I cannot see faces clearly. That morning, when the kitchen noise woke me up, I jumped out of bed without putting my glasses on first. I think my first thought was that it might be my younger son. He was a troublemaker back then, and honestly, he still is in some ways. He had the kind of energy where if something was happening in the house, especially something he should not be doing, there was a good chance he was involved. So I got up quickly and went to the hall. I was still half asleep, with my vision blurry and my mind trying to catch up. I looked down the hallway toward the kitchen, where the noise had come from. In front of the rack I used as a pantry, I saw what looked like a man in fatigues. The rack was there because the kitchen had terrible storage. It had almost no useful cabinet space, so I had to use a rack to keep pantry items on. Cereal, boxes, snacks, dry goods, things like that. And standing right in front of it, from what I could make out, was a man. Because my vision was so bad without glasses, I could not see details. I could not see his face. I could not see exactly what he was holding. But I could tell it was a man, and I could tell he was white. He was wearing what looked like fatigues, so I immediately assumed it was my husband. That was the most logical answer. He was in the Air Force. He wore fatigues. He worked nights. He could have come home while I was asleep. There was nothing at first that made me think it was anyone else. I said something like, "Hey, guess I slept in. You hungry?" I asked because it looked like he had picked something up off the pantry rack. That also fit with what I thought was happening. Maybe he had come home from work and was looking for food. Maybe he was irritated because nobody was awake yet. Maybe he was hungry and in one of his moods. With him, that was always possible. The figure turned and moved farther into the kitchen, into the part where I could not see from the hallway. That reaction did not seem strange to me at first. I thought it was just my husband being his normal, moody self. He had a way of not answering, of moving around without speaking, of making it clear through silence that he was annoyed. So I sighed. I probably felt that familiar, tired frustration, the feeling of already preparing myself to deal with whatever mood he was in. I went back to my nightstand, got my glasses, and put them on so I could actually see. Then I walked down the hall toward the kitchen. There was nobody there. The kitchen was empty. At first, my brain did not accept that. I had just seen someone standing there. I had spoken to him. He had turned and moved into the kitchen. The whole thing had happened only seconds earlier. I looked around, expecting him to be just out of sight, maybe near the counter, maybe by the door, maybe in the den or living room. But there was no one. I took the few steps toward the den and looked in there too. Nothing. I looked toward the living room beyond it. Nothing, no movement, no person, no sound. The house was still. The man I had seen was gone. My first thought was that maybe he had left through the carport door, but that did not work. The door squeaked. It always made noise when it opened or closed. I would have heard it. Also, only about 60 seconds had passed at most. It was not a big house. There was no way someone could have moved through the kitchen, opened the door, left, and gotten away without me hearing that squeak or seeing some sign of them. And when I looked outside, only my car was in the drive. My husband's vehicle was not there. That was when the fear started to settle in. It was not the kind of fear where you scream immediately. It was quieter and colder than that. I stood there trying to make sense of what I had seen. I did not believe in ghosts or anything paranormal. I was not someone who wanted to turn every weird moment into a haunting. I wanted normal explanations. I still do. But I knew what I saw. I had seen what looked like a man in fatigues standing at my pantry rack. I had spoken to him. I had watched him turn and move deeper into the kitchen. Then I put on my glasses and found nothing. If that had been the whole thing, maybe I could have eventually written it off. I have poor vision. I had just woken up. Maybe my eyes had turned some shadow or object into a person. Maybe I was still half asleep and my brain filled in the details. Maybe it was some kind of waking hallucination. I would have tried to explain it that way because that would have been easier. But then I saw the box on the floor. There was a box of Annie's mac and cheese lying on the kitchen floor about 1.5 feet in front of the pantry rack. That stopped me. The box had not been there before. At least, not that I remembered. It belonged on the rack. And the location was strange. It was sitting out in front of the rack, like it had been picked up or knocked down and landed there. That mattered because when I saw the figure, it looked like he had picked something up from the rack. The mac and cheese box on the floor made the whole thing feel physical. It was no longer just a blurry shape seen without glasses. Something had moved. I picked the box up and put it back where it belonged. Then I did something that I still think about. I gently tipped it from the spot where it had been sitting to see where it would land if it simply fell on its own. It did not land anywhere near where I had found it, not even close. That made my stomach drop even more, because it meant the box had not just slipped off the shelf in a normal way, at least not from that position. It had ended up too far out from the rack. That was the detail that kept me from dismissing the whole thing as a hallucination. I could maybe hallucinate a man if I was tired and not wearing my glasses. I could maybe misread a shadow or a shape. But the box on the floor was real. I touched it. I put it back. I tested where it would fall. It did not make sense. If nothing had been there, why was that box on the floor? If it fell by itself, why did it land so far from the rack? And why did I see a man standing right there at the exact moment the noise woke me up? I kept going over it in my mind. My husband was not home. His vehicle was not in the driveway. The door had not squeaked. Nobody had left. Nobody was in the den, living room, or kitchen. My kids were where they were supposed to be. There was no intruder that I could find. No explanation that fit every part of it. That house already had a strange feeling in certain places. My older son had the master bedroom with an ensuite bathroom, and nobody really wanted to use it because it was creepy as hell. I do not mean it was just ugly or badly arranged. It had a feeling to it. Some rooms do. You walk into them, and something about the space feels wrong, even when you cannot explain why. That room was like that. It was supposed to be the nicest bedroom, the master bedroom, but it had an uncomfortable energy that made people avoid it. When we first moved in, I had one experience in that bathroom that made me dislike it even more. I was taking a shower in there, and I saw movement in the window. It scared me badly enough that I screamed for my husband. He ran outside to check the back of the house. But of course, there was nothing there. No person. No sign that anyone had been standing outside. Nothing that explained what I saw. At the time, I tried to tell myself it was probably a shadow or some kind of reflection. Maybe a branch moved. Maybe my eyes played a trick on me. But after the kitchen incident, that memory felt different, too. The kitchen experience was the one that stayed with me the most, though, because it happened in such a normal part of the house, in the morning while I was awake enough to talk. It was not late at night. It was not during a dream. It was not in the creepy master bathroom where I already felt uncomfortable. It was in the kitchen, in a house I knew, after a noise woke me up. I saw a man in fatigues, assumed he was my husband, spoke to him, and then he vanished. I still do not know what to make of it. Part of what makes it difficult is that my life at that time was already stressful. Living with someone unpredictable changes your nervous system. I was always alert, always bracing, always prepared for conflict. So I have asked myself whether stress played a role. Could my brain have expected my husband so strongly that it created him out of a blurry shape? Could the sound in the kitchen have been the box falling, and because I was scared or half awake, I imagined a man there? That is the rational path my mind wants to take. But then there's the way the figure moved. It did not just stand there like a shadow. It turned. It moved farther into the kitchen, out of my sight. That is what made me sigh and go get my glasses. It behaved like a person. And then there's the box, too far from the rack for the simple fall test to explain. Those details do not let me fully write it off. I also think about the fatigues. If I had seen a random shadowy person in normal clothes, maybe I would have reacted differently. But I saw what looked like a man in fatigues, and because of my husband's job, my mind immediately made the connection. That is why I spoke so casually. I was not scared at first. I thought it was him. I thought he had come home from work and was standing there looking for food. I thought I was about to deal with whatever mood he was in. That makes the disappearance even stranger. It is possible my mind filled in the fatigues because that is what I expected him to wear. I can admit that. My vision was fuzzy, and my brain might have taken a man-shaped blur and turned it into the most likely person. But if that is true, what was the man-shaped blur? What was standing there? What made the noise? What moved the mac and cheese box? Where did it go? There are no answers that satisfy me. The house was at Shaw Air Force Base in South Carolina around 2006. I do not know if that matters, but I always include it because it is part of the memory. Military housing can have a strange feeling sometimes. People move in and out. Families live under stress. Things happen in those homes that the next family may never know about. I am not saying that proves anything paranormal. I am just saying the house did not feel neutral to me, and that master bedroom especially had a feeling no one liked. I still do not believe in ghosts in a simple way. I do not go around saying everything unexplained is supernatural. But I also cannot deny what happened in that kitchen. I know I saw someone. I know I heard something. I know the box was on the floor. I know my husband was not there. I know the door did not open. I know there was nowhere for a real person to disappear in that amount of time. The more I think about it, the more unsettling it becomes. At first, I was not afraid because I believed the figure was my husband. That is already sad in its own way, because my first reaction to seeing him was not comfort. It was caution, a sigh, and the question of whether he was hungry. That was the life I was living then. But once I realized it was not him, the fear changed. It was no longer the fear of someone's temper. It became the fear of something impossible, standing in my kitchen, wearing a familiar form, touching things on my pantry rack, and then vanishing when I tried to see clearly. I do not know if it was a ghost. I do not know if it was some kind of hallucination mixed with a real object falling. I do not know if the house had something strange in it. I only know that I have never been able to explain it in a way that makes me feel settled. If it was an intruder, where did he go? If it was my husband, why was his car not there? And why did the door not squeak? If it was my younger son, why did it look like a grown man in fatigues? And how would he have disappeared into nothing? If it was a hallucination, why was the box on the floor in a place it should not have landed? Every answer creates another question. That is why the memory has stayed with me. It was not dramatic like a horror movie. The lights did not flicker. No one whispered my name. No figure floated above the floor. It was almost worse, because it was so ordinary at first. A noise in the kitchen. A man in fatigues by the pantry rack. Me asking if he was hungry. A figure turning away. Glasses from the nightstand. An empty room, a box of mac and cheese on the floor. That is the kind of thing that burrows into your mind because it almost makes sense, but not quite. I can still picture the hallway and the view into the kitchen. I can still feel the fuzzy blur of my vision before I put my glasses on. I can still see the shape of the man standing there. I can still hear myself speaking to him like he belonged in the house. I can still remember the strange blank feeling when I walked into the kitchen and found no one there. And I can still remember picking up that box, putting it back, tipping it gently, and realizing it could not have landed where I found it. I do not believe in ghosts, but I know what I saw. This comment section honestly gave me better real stories than most of what I have read on No Sleep. I do not have anything as wild or as terrifying as some of the experiences people are sharing here, but I do have one small thing that happened to me that I still think about from time to time. It is not dramatic. Nobody was hurt. I did not see a ghost standing in front of me. There was no face in the window, no shadow figure at the end of the bed, and no voice calling my name. But the thing about real scary moments is that they do not always need to be huge. Sometimes one small sound in the wrong place and at the wrong time is enough to make your whole body go cold. We have a room on the roof of our building. It is not a big fancy room or anything like that. It is just one of those rooftop rooms that people use for different things. Sometimes it is for storage, sometimes for sitting quietly, sometimes just as a place to get away from the rest of the house for a while. I used to spend time there at night. It was peaceful in a way that the rest of the building was not. Downstairs, there were always normal house sounds, people moving around, doors opening, someone talking, maybe a TV or phone playing somewhere. But up on the roof, especially late at night, everything felt separate. I would sometimes stay there late before going down to bed. It became a little habit for me. I liked the quiet. I liked being alone for a while. There is something different about sitting in a room on the roof at night. You know the city or neighborhood is still out there, but it feels far away. The air is usually cooler. The sounds are softer and more distant. You can hear things from outside, but they do not feel as close as they do at street level. A dog barking far away, a bike passing somewhere, maybe voices from another building, maybe nothing at all. It can feel peaceful, but it can also feel a little strange if you let your mind focus too much on the silence. That night was ordinary at first. I had no reason to feel afraid. I had been in that rooftop room many times before, and nothing strange had ever happened there. It was not one of those places where I already felt uncomfortable. I did not go up there thinking it was haunted or creepy. It was familiar. That might be part of why what happened bothered me so much. When a place already feels scary, you expect your imagination to play tricks on you. But when a place feels normal and safe, one strange thing can disturb you much more because it does not fit. I was sitting there late at night, probably doing nothing important. Maybe I was looking at my phone, thinking, or just enjoying a few quiet minutes before going downstairs. The room was closed, and the door separated me from the open roof area outside. The building was quiet. It was the kind of late-night quiet where even small sounds seem louder than they should. You become aware of your own movements, your breathing, the little shifts in the building, the faint noises in the distance. Everything feels still. Then I heard a knock on the door. It was not loud like someone banging hard with their fist, but it was clear enough that I froze. A knock on a door at night is such a simple thing, but when you are alone on a roof, it becomes something else. There should not have been anyone there. At least, not someone knocking on that door at that hour. I sat still for a second, listening. My first thought was probably that I had imagined it. Maybe it was a sound from somewhere else. Maybe something shifted. Maybe the latch or door bolt had moved. Houses and buildings make noises sometimes, especially at night when there are no other sounds to cover them. Before I could calm myself down, there was another knock. This one did not come right after the first one in a normal pattern. It was not like knock, 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 the way a person usually knocks when they want someone to answer. It came after a strange pause. That was the part that bothered me immediately. The intervals were irregular. There was no rhythm. It did not sound like a normal person politely knocking. But it also did not sound completely random. It felt like something was testing the door, or like someone outside was making just enough noise to make sure I heard it. I sat there, staring toward the door. Then another knock came. By that point, the chill had already started moving through me. It was not just nervousness. It was that sudden, cold feeling that goes down your spine when your body understands something is wrong before your brain has a proper explanation. I remember feeling genuinely afraid to open the door. That may sound silly because it was only a few knocks, but in that moment, it did not feel silly at all. I was alone, it was late, and I was on the roof. The door was the only thing between me and whatever was outside. The room suddenly felt smaller. A few minutes earlier, it had been quiet and comfortable. Now it felt like a box. I was inside, and something was outside. That is how fear works sometimes. Nothing in the room had changed, but because of the knocks, the entire space felt different. The walls felt closer. The darkness outside the door felt heavier. I became aware of the fact that if someone really was standing there, I had no idea who it could be or what they wanted. There were 4 or 5 knocks in total, but not in one clean series. They came at odd intervals. A knock, then a pause. Another knock, then another pause. Maybe 2 closer together, then silence again. It was not enough to sound like a normal visitor, and it was not enough to ignore. Each knock made me more tense because I was waiting for the next one. The silence between them was almost worse than the sound itself. During those pauses, my mind started filling in possibilities. Maybe someone from the building had come up for some reason. Maybe a family member needed me. Maybe a neighbor had somehow come onto the roof. Maybe it was a kid messing around. Maybe it was an animal. Maybe it was the wind moving the door latch. I tried to think of every normal explanation I could, because I did not want the fear to grow. But none of the explanations felt strong enough in that moment. The easiest explanation was the wind. The door had a latch, or an awl drop, the kind of metal piece that can move and make noise if the door shakes. Maybe the wind had pushed it. Maybe the metal had hit the door a few times. That was the logical answer I wanted to accept. But even as I thought it, something felt wrong about it. It was not windy that night. I did not hear the wind pushing against the door. I did not hear anything rattling continuously. The air outside had felt still, and if the wind was strong enough to move the latch or door bolt, why did it only happen like that one time? Why had it never happened before? And why did it never happen again? That is what made the explanation feel weak. I had spent time in that rooftop room many times. I knew the sounds it made. I knew how the door behaved. If the latch was loose or the wind could easily move it, I should have heard that noise before. It should have happened on other nights, especially on nights when the weather was actually windy. But this was the first time. The knocks were clear, strange, and timed in a way that felt too intentional. They sounded like someone, or something, wanted my attention. Still, I knew I could not sit there forever. That was the worst part. I did not want to open the door, but I also felt like I had to. I had to know what was outside. The fear of not knowing was becoming unbearable. At first, I told myself to wait. Maybe if it was a person, they would knock again or call out. Maybe if it was the wind, it would happen again and I could understand the pattern. But the silence after the knocks stretched out, and the longer I waited, the more my courage disappeared. I sat there for 5 or 6 minutes before I could make myself move. 5 or 6 minutes does not sound long when you say it casually, but when you are alone in a room at night, after hearing something knock on your door, it feels much longer. Every second gives your imagination more room to work. I kept looking at the door, trying to decide what to do. I probably listened harder than I have ever listened in my life. I wanted to hear footsteps, breathing, a whisper, the sound of someone moving away, anything. But there was nothing. just silence. I think part of me hoped that someone would speak. A voice would have made it easier, even if it scared me at first. If someone had said my name or called out, I would at least know it was a person. But no voice came. That made it worse because the knocking had no owner. A sound without a source can become more frightening than a person standing there. At least the person can be understood. This was just a question, waiting behind the door. Eventually, I forced myself to get up. I did it slowly. I was trying to be quiet, which is funny because if someone was outside, they probably already knew I was inside. But fear makes you move carefully. I stepped toward the door, probably holding my breath without realizing it. My heart was beating hard. My body was ready for something, even though I did not know what. I remember feeling that I did not want to put my face too close to the door. I did not want to open it too quickly either. I wanted to be brave and careful at the same time. When I finally reached the door, I waited another moment. I listened again. Nothing. No footsteps. No clothes brushing against the wall. No breathing. No whisper. No movement. Just that quiet rooftop air on the other side. My hand went to the door, and I opened it. There was nothing there. Of course, there was nothing. The roof area outside was empty. No person standing there, no neighbor, no family member, no child playing a prank, no animal that I could see. Nothing near the door that looked like it had hit it. No obvious reason for the knocks. Just the open roof, the night, and the same familiar surroundings I had seen so many times before. Everything looked normal, and that normalness somehow made the whole thing feel more unsettling. I looked around carefully. I wanted to find something. A loose piece of metal, a branch, a wire, anything that could explain the sound. I did not want it to be mysterious. I wanted to laugh at myself and say, oh, that's what it was. But I did not find anything like that. There was no clear source. The door was just a door. The latch was there. The roof was quiet. The night was still. If something had knocked, it was gone. If nothing had knocked, then I had no idea what I heard. After a while, I told myself it must have been the wind moving the latch or bolt. That was the explanation I settled on because it was the most normal one. Wind can do strange things. Metal can shift. Doors can creak and knock. Buildings can make sounds that seem much more deliberate than they are. I know that. I understand it. And if someone else told me this story, I might say the same thing to them. I might say it was probably the wind, but for some reason, that explanation never felt quite right. The problem is, it was not windy that night. I keep coming back to that. I remember the stillness. I remember not hearing the wind moving around outside. And even if there had been a little wind, why did it create 4 or 5 knocks at irregular intervals and then stop completely? Why had it never happened before on windier nights? Why has it never happened again since? If it was a loose latch, it should have repeated at some point. If it was the normal behavior of that door, I would know. But this was a one-time thing. That is what bothers me about it. It was small, but it was specific. 4 or 5 knocks, late at night, on the rooftop door. No wind, no one outside, no repeat. It happened once, scared me badly, and then never happened again. Sometimes the smallest unexplained things stay with you longer because they are almost explainable, but not quite. Your mind keeps reaching for the answer, and every time it gets close, something does not fit. I know this is not the kind of story where people scream and run, or where some terrifying figure appears. Compared to the other stories in that comment section, mine is tiny. But in the moment, sitting in that rooftop room alone, it did not feel tiny. It felt real. The fear was real. The chill down my spine was real. The hesitation before opening the door was real. I can still remember how long those 5 or 6 minutes felt while I tried to gather enough courage to check outside. There is a strange kind of embarrassment that comes after something like that. Once you open the door and find nothing, part of you wants to laugh at yourself. You feel silly for being scared. You tell yourself you overreacted. Maybe it was just the wind. Maybe it was just the building. Maybe you were tired. Maybe the late hour made the sound feel bigger than it was. I did laugh about it a little afterward, because what else can you do? I had sat there for several minutes afraid to open a door, and there was nothing behind it. But another part of me did not find it funny. That part kept asking, if there was nothing there, what knocked? I think that is why I still remember it. It was not the sound alone. It was the fact that the sound felt like someone knocking, and when I opened the door, there was nobody. I know the human mind is good at turning random noises into patterns. I know we hear things and interpret them in familiar ways. A loose piece of metal can sound like a knock. A pipe can sound like footsteps. A creak can sound like a voice. But this did not feel like one random noise I misunderstood. It felt like knocks, separated by pauses, right on the door. And I was alone. That detail changes everything. If someone had been with me, maybe we would have opened the door quickly. We might have joked about it and moved on. Fear is easier when it is shared. But alone, every small sound becomes personal. A knock on the door is not just a sound. It is a question aimed at you. Someone or something is asking to be noticed. And when you are the only one there to hear it, the silence afterward feels even heavier. I still use the wind explanation when I talk about it, because it is the only explanation that makes any kind of sense. I say the all drop or door latch probably moved and made the noise. That is the reasonable answer. That is the answer that lets the story stay small and normal. But inside, I have never fully believed it. Something about the timing, the still air, and the fact that it never happened again makes the whole thing sit wrong with me. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just one of those odd building sounds that happen once and never repeat. Maybe the metal shifted in a strange way. Maybe a tiny movement of air hit the door just right. Maybe some animal came close, touched the door, and left before I opened it. Maybe there was a person there and they disappeared before I checked, though that thought is not exactly comforting either. I have considered all of it. I just do not know. What I do know is that for those few minutes, I was genuinely afraid. Not slightly nervous, not pretending to be creeped out for a story. Actually afraid. I sat there trying to convince myself to open the door while every instinct in my body told me not to. When I finally opened it and found nothing, the fear did not vanish completely. It just changed into confusion. That room on the roof never felt exactly the same after that. I could still go there, but I was more aware of the door, more aware of the silence outside it, more aware of how isolated that room felt late at night. Before, it had been a peaceful place to sit before bed. After that, it became the place where something knocked one night and left no explanation behind. So yes, compared to other stories, mine is small. It was only 4 or 5 knocks on a door. But those knocks came at irregular intervals, late at night, on a rooftop, when no one should have been there. It was not windy. There was nothing outside when I finally opened the door. It had never happened before, and it has never happened again. And even though I still tell myself it was probably just the latch moving in the wind, a part of me has never believed that answer. When I was a kid, I went over to hang out at a new friend's place for the first time. He was someone I had not known for very long, so everything about going to his house still felt a little new to me. It was not like visiting a best friend whose house you already knew inside and out, where you knew where the kitchen was, where the bathroom was, which door stuck when you opened it, and what snacks their parents usually kept around. This was a new friend, a new house, and a new family. I was still in that early stage where you're trying to be polite, trying not to seem awkward, and trying to figure out how things work in someone else's home. I rode my bike there. Back then, that was a normal thing to do. If you wanted to go to a friend's house, you got on your bike and went. Cell phones were only just starting to be a thing, at least for people around us. It was not like now where every kid has a phone and everyone can text every little update. My friend did not have a cell phone. His dad had one, though, which already felt like a big deal at the time. So when I got to the house and realized I had arrived before my friend and his dad, I called his dad. I do not remember every word of the call, but it was very simple and normal. I told him I was already there. He told me to hang tight and said they would be there soon. He also told me I could go inside. That part is important, because I did not feel like I was doing anything wrong by entering the house. I was not sneaking in. I was not wandering around where I did not belong. A parent had told me it was okay. So, as far as I understood, I was just waiting inside for my friend to come home. I put my bike somewhere outside, probably near the house or wherever it seemed safe, and went in. When I entered, my friend's mom greeted me. At least, that is what I thought at the time. She welcomed me like she knew exactly who I was and why I was there. There was nothing strange about her behavior. She did not act surprised to see me. She did not ask why I was in the house or what I was doing there. She was warm and casual, the way a parent might be when their kid has a friend coming over. She made me feel like I was expected. And because I was a kid and everything about the situation seemed to line up, I accepted it without question. I remember her getting me water. That alone made the whole thing feel normal. It is such a simple, parent-like thing to do when a kid comes over. You give them something to drink, maybe ask if they are hungry, maybe make small talk, and that is exactly what she did. She made me a snack, too. Again, nothing about that felt suspicious to me. It actually made me feel more comfortable, because I was in a new place, and this adult was being kind. She was acting exactly the way I expected a friend's mom to act. She chatted with me for a bit while I waited. I do not remember the full conversation now, but I remember it feeling ordinary. It was not weird, threatening, or uncomfortable. She did not say anything that scared me. She did not act like someone hiding something. She was just there, talking to me, taking care of me like I was a guest. Maybe she asked about school, or how I knew her son, or what we were planning to do that day. It was the kind of small talk adults make with kids, and at the time it was so normal that it barely stood out. That is one of the strangest parts when I look back on it. Nothing about her seemed wrong. If she had acted nervous, I might have remembered it differently. If she had rushed me inside, locked the door, asked me strange questions, or had told me not to tell anyone she was there, I would have known something was off. But she did none of that. She was calm, friendly, and completely believable. She fit into the house like she belonged there. She moved around like she knew where things were. She gave me water and food like it was her kitchen. She spoke to me like she was used to being there. After a little while, she said she had to leave. That did not seem weird either. Adults leave houses all the time. Maybe she had errands. Maybe she had work. Maybe she had somewhere to be before my friend and his dad got back. I did not question it. She had welcomed me, given me something to drink, made me a snack, talked to me, and then said she had to go. In my child mind, that was perfectly ordinary. I was just waiting for my friend to arrive. Soon after that, my friend and his dad came home. Nothing dramatic happened when they got there. I did not run to them and say some strange woman had been in the house, because I did not think a strange woman had been in the house. I thought his mom had been there. That seemed so obvious to me that it did not even feel worth mentioning. Imagine going to a friend's house, being greeted by an adult woman, getting water and a snack, and then your friend arriving a little later. Most kids would just assume that woman was the friend's mom. I did exactly that. We probably went on with our day like normal. Maybe we played video games, rode bikes, watched TV, or did whatever kids did when they hung out back then. I do not remember the rest of the visit because, at the time, the woman was not the interesting part of the day. She was just part of the background. She was the adult who had been home before my friend got there. That was it. For years, I did not really think about it. It became one of those memories that sits quietly in your mind without meaning anything special. I remembered going to his house. I remembered getting there before him. I remembered being let inside. I remembered his mom greeting me. But because it all seemed so normal, I never brought it up. There was no reason to. People do not usually tell a friend, "Hey, remember that time your mom gave me water?" It was too ordinary to mention. A couple of years went by before it came up again. I do not remember exactly what we were talking about when I brought it up. Maybe we were remembering old times. Maybe something reminded me of that first visit. Maybe we were talking about parents or his house or the early days of our friendship. Whatever the reason, I casually mentioned the interaction. I said something about the time I got to his house before him and his mom was there, and she let me in, gave me water, made me a snack, and talked with me before leaving. I expected him to remember it, or at least shrug it off. Instead, he stopped me dead. His reaction was immediate. He did not laugh in a normal way. He did not say, "Oh yeah, I remember that." He looked at me like I had just said something impossible. At first, I thought maybe I had remembered the details wrong. Maybe I had mixed up his house with someone else's. Maybe I had said mom when I meant another relative. But then he said something that made my stomach drop. He thought I was messing with him. He said something like, "Dude, my mom is in California, and I've only seen her twice. That wasn't her." That sentence changed the entire memory in an instant. Up until that moment, the memory had been harmless. It was just a simple childhood visit. But the second he said that, everything shifted. The house, the woman, the water, the snack, the conversation, all of it became something else. It was like looking at a normal picture and suddenly noticing a face in the background that should not be there. The memory did not change, but the meaning of it did. I remember trying to process what he had just told me. His mom lived in California. He had only seen her twice. She was not there. She had not greeted me. She had not made me a snack. She had not left before he and his dad got home. The person I had met was not his mother at all. So who was she? That question has stayed with me ever since. The most disturbing thing is that nobody had any idea. Not him, not me, not his dad, as far as I know. There was no simple answer. She was not his mom. She was not some woman he recognized. She was not someone who should have been in the house acting like she belonged there. And yet, she had been there. She had been inside the house before they arrived. She had greeted me as if everything was normal. I tried to think back on her appearance, but childhood memories can be strange. I could remember the feeling of her being there more than every exact detail of her face. I knew she seemed like a normal adult woman. I knew she was friendly. I knew she was calm. I knew she gave me water and made me food. But I could not pull out some clear description that would help identify her. At the time, I had not been studying her. I had no reason to. I thought she was exactly who she appeared to be. That bothers me now. If I had known something was wrong, I would have paid closer attention. I would have remembered her voice, her clothes, her height, her hair, whether she had a purse, whether she seemed nervous, anything. But because I believed she was my friend's mom, my brain filed her away as ordinary. That is how convincing she was. She did not just look like she belonged there. She made me believe she belonged there. I started thinking about the phone call with his dad. He had told me I could go inside. Did he know someone would be there? Did he think the house was empty? Did he assume I could wait inside safely because maybe the door was unlocked or because that was normal for them? If he had no idea a woman was inside, then that makes it even stranger. I was a kid walking into a house where an unknown adult woman was already present, and nobody knew who she was, and she did not behave like a burglar. That is another part that makes it hard to explain. If she had broken into the house, why would she welcome me? Why would she act like a parent? Why would she give me water and make me a snack? Why would she stay and chat, then casually leave before the actual residents came home? A burglar would probably hide, run, or try to get me out. She did not seem panicked. She did not seem caught. She did not seem afraid of being discovered. She acted like she had every right to be there. Maybe she was someone connected to the family somehow, but my friend did not know her. Maybe she was a neighbor, a relative, a friend of the dad, someone who had access to the house. But then, why did nobody know who she was later? Why would she be introduced in my memory as Mom if she was not? Did she ever actually say she was his mom? I do not remember for sure. Maybe she never did. Maybe I simply assumed it. But even if I assumed it, she did nothing to correct me. She stepped into that role perfectly. I have also wondered if there was some misunderstanding. Maybe I went to the wrong house. But that does not fit either, because my friend and his dad arrived there soon after. It was definitely the right place. I was inside the right house. My friend came home to that same house. So it was not as simple as me entering a neighbor's place by mistake and being helped by some random woman. I was where I was supposed to be. Another possibility is that my memory mixed up 2 different days or 2 different houses, but that does not feel right to me. The sequence is too specific. I biked there. I arrived before them. I called his dad. He told me they would be there soon and that I could go inside. I entered. A woman greeted me, gave me water, made me a snack, talked to me, then left. Then my friend and his dad arrived. That memory is not a vague, dreamlike thing. It is a clear chain of events. And years later, my friend's reaction made it real in a different way. He was not amused. He did not play along. He did not say, oh, that must have been my aunt, or that was my dad's girlfriend, or that was a neighbor. He stopped me because what I was saying did not match his life at all. His mother was in California. He had barely seen her. The woman in the house was not his mom, and apparently they had no idea who she could have been. That is when the memory became creepy. Not because anything scary happened while I was there. In fact, that is the unsettling thing. Nothing scary happened. She was nice. She took care of me. She made me feel comfortable. If she had been mean or strange, I might have recognized the danger right away, but she was kind. She seemed safe. And that makes it worse, because it means a complete stranger may have been inside that house with me, a child, and I trusted her completely. I think about how vulnerable I was. I was a kid. I had biked there alone. I was waiting for my friend. Cell phones were barely a thing, and I did not have one. My parents were not there. My friend and his dad were not there yet. I was inside a house with a woman I believed was his mother, and if she had wanted to do something bad, I probably would not have questioned her. I accepted the water. I accepted the snack. I talked with her. I stayed there because I thought everything was normal. That realization is what scares me now. At the time, I was safe. Nothing happened to me. She did not hurt me. She did not threaten me. She did not even make me uncomfortable. But years later, knowing she was not who I thought she was, I cannot help wondering what her purpose was. Why was she there? Why did she leave right before my friend and his dad arrived? Was the timing a coincidence, or did she know they were coming? Did she hear them pull up? Did she leave through a back door? Was she watching the house? Had she been inside before I got there? Did she know me, or was I just an unexpected visitor? There are no answers. That is the kind of story that does not scare you in the moment, but gets worse with age. As a kid, I saw a friendly woman in a friend's house. As an adult, I see a stranger in a house where she did not belong, calmly pretending to be part of the family. The older I get, the more unsettling it becomes. Children trust adults too easily, especially adults who act kind. That woman knew how to act normal enough that I never questioned her. I still wonder what would have happened if I had mentioned it that same day. What if, when my friend and his dad arrived, I had said, "Your mom was just here and made me a snack"? Would his dad have reacted immediately? Would he have searched the house? Would he have gone after her? Would we have found out who she was? Maybe the mystery only exists because I did not know it was a mystery until years later. By the time I brought it up, it was far too late. Whoever she was long gone. That is part of what bothers me most. The chance to understand it passed before any of us realized there was anything to understand. I think about the house after she left. Did she lock the door behind her? Did she walk down the street? Did she have a car parked nearby? Did anyone see her? Did she take anything? Did she leave anything behind? I do not know. I was a child, and to me, she was just my friend's mom leaving the house. I did not watch her closely. I did not think to check where she went. I simply waited. My friend and I never figured it out. As far as I know, neither did his dad. There was no hidden explanation that came out later. No relative from out of town. No family friend. No babysitter. No neighbor. Just an unknown woman who was inside the house, welcomed me in, fed me, talked to me, and left. And she was certainly not his mom. That sentence still gives me chills, because it turns the whole memory upside down. The entire time I was sitting there, I was wrong about the most basic part of the situation. I thought I was being cared for by someone who belonged in the home. Instead, I was sitting with a stranger nobody could identify. I do not know if the story is paranormal or just deeply unsettling in a real-world way. Maybe she was a ghost, though she seemed solid and normal. Maybe she was a living person who had somehow gotten into the house and decided to act like she belonged. Honestly, the living person explanation might be even scarier, because that means a real stranger was comfortable enough to walk around someone's home and interact with a child like it was nothing. Whatever the truth is, I have never forgotten it. I went to my new friend's house as a kid, arrived before him, and was told by his dad that I could wait inside. A woman greeted me, gave me water, made me a snack, chatted with me, and then left. For years, I thought that woman was his mother. It was so ordinary that I never even thought to mention it. Then, years later, I brought it up. My friend looked at me like I was joking and told me his mom lived in California, and he had only seen her twice. That woman was not his mom. None of us ever found out who she was. If you've stayed with me this far, then these stories didn't simply pass the time. They stayed with you. Everything you heard tonight was real. Real people. Real moments. And in each one, something quietly slipped out of place. If you'd like more of the kind that don't let go so easily, subscribe to Crowvane Manor. There are more rooms left open and more stories waiting behind every door. I'm grateful you spent this part of your night here. Rest well, and I'll be waiting when you return.